Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin is currently on trial for involuntary manslaughter after accidentally shooting and killing his cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins, on the set of his film Rust. Before we get started with this analysis, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, the goal of this is not to prove guilt nor innocence. The goal is to provide commentary based on his behavior and his body language. Last thing before we get started is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. So what we're going to be looking at today is Alec Baldwin's reactions to the opening statements by both the prosecution as well as his defense. We're also going to be looking at his reaction during some witness statements. Let's just jump right in.
The morning of October 21st started out a couple of hours behind. They filmed some scenes at this church on the Bonanza Creek Ranch, and you will see.
So what you're seeing right here is the prosecution providing their opening statements. Now, as you can tell, Alec Baldwin looks very focused on what he's doing. He's taking notes, he's listening, but what he's not doing is bringing attention to himself. And that's extremely important. So what he's doing is just as important as what he's not. I'm going to comment more on this as we go, but let's watch a little bit more.
See that one of those scenes required the defendant to pull out his gun. This was in the morning. Pull out his gun. And you'll hear the director tell him, pull it out and hold it. And the first time, you'll see evidence the defendant does what the director tells him. But you will hear the director tell you that.
So as you can see, he's not doing things to bring attention to himself. And this is a big problem we see in other trials. People shaking their heads, crossing their arms, and making sure that people know how much they disagree with statements being made. They want to make it very clear, I don't agree with anything being said. For someone like Alec Baldwin, who is famous, that could become a big problem. It doesn't work well for anybody, really, but for someone in his position, it could really work against him even more. What he should not want to do, particularly being famous, is to make himself seem special, or that he thinks he's special, or to show too much of a reaction. He needs to blend in with everything, which is exactly what he's doing. He's actually doing the right thing here. He's doing what he needs to do in order for the jury not to be affected by his behavior. Because in something like this, presumably you want the evidence to be what everybody bases their decision on, but that's not always the case with juries. Juries will base decisions based on how they feel about you, what they're observing about you. Doesn't mean they would necessarily swing a jury one way or the other, but it doesn't change the fact that there is an impact. So the goal here should be to blend in, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Many times the defendant would do his own thing. So then the director in the morning asked him, okay, do it again, just like you did now. The defendant pulls out the gun, but this time he cocks the hammer. The evidence will show they then broke for lunch. And at around 1:30 or so, they came back to this church to do what's called.
So once again, there are things that we're not seeing. He's not raising his eyebrows. We raise our eyebrows to bring attention to our face. We see this oftentimes during opening statements. We see this very frequently with people that are on trial. He's not doing any of those things. Once again, smart strategy for somebody who is on trial, particularly someone who is in his position.
A blocking. The evidence will show that Ms. Hutchins, you will hear from one of the witnesses who walked into the church and saw the defendant kind of playing with his gun. And then you will see evidence or hear evidence that.
So you see behaviors like this, sitting like this. Pretty normal behavior. This is just a look of concentration. This appears to be genuine. And once again, it seems that he's focused on what's being said. It seems that he's taking notes. Whether or not that's just how he's choosing to appear, that's the smarter thing to do right now. Because once again, if he was reacting to everything that she was saying, if he was looking at the prosecutor, like I said, shaking his head or rolling his eyes, those types of things, which we see a lot during trials, would not go well for him. So right now, strategically, this is probably the right way to approach this.
Was given the gun back, and she took it and loaded it with dummy rounds. And what you will learn is that dummy rounds are inert rounds. They look like real rounds, but they are very easy to tell that they are not because they'll rattle.
So what you're seeing right now, scratching the neck, trying to think about whether or not he should adjust his glasses, all pretty normal signs of stress. These are all things that we would expect from somebody that's in his position. What we're not seeing is a performance, which once again, very important that he not put on a performance for everybody. Because if he were to do that, once again, that would draw attention to himself, which is exactly what he does not want to do right now.
Not because they'll rattle. Ms. Gutierrez then went back to the church in processing this gun for forensics and examination. You will learn that the gun and some ammunition that was taken from the set and from PD.
So watch his eyes right here. I'm going to explain something about what happens when we close our eyes.
You will learn that the.
So right now, given the context of what they're talking about, you can see that he's closing his eyes as she's speaking. Oftentimes we do that as a way to block out what's going on. In a very literal sense, we close our eyes because in some ways we're overstimulated. We're getting stressed. We don't like what we're hearing. So it's not unusual at all when somebody's hearing something like this or when we're experiencing something that's causing us great amounts of stress that we close our eyes just briefly, if nothing else, to block out some of all that data and that information coming at us.
This gun for forensics and examination. You will learn that the gun and some ammunition that was taken from the set and from PDQ arms were sent to the FBI for analysis.
And once again, this sign right here, him sitting and resting on his hands, a fairly normal sign of concentration. There's nothing about that stands out. What we're really looking for is changes in behavior, because when you see changes in behavior, that gives you more information about what they're reacting to. This is all pretty normal signs of stress.
Two arms were sent to the FBI for analysis. You will learn that.
Now we're going to skip ahead to the defense's opening statements and see how his behavior is different.
And on that day in question, the cast and the creative directors and crew in the church, it's a fake church. Their actors are not in their normal clothes, it's costumes. There's debris falling from the ceiling, it's fake debris. And they yell out "cold gun." And that is an important term.
As you can probably already tell, his behavior and his body language changed pretty dramatically between when the prosecution was speaking relative to when the defense is speaking. He's sitting up very straight. He's paying a lot of attention. He's looking directly at the defense. Right now, he looks very confident. So I think that he does have a lot of confidence in the defense providing their opening statements right now.
It means that the gun is cold. No one need worry. But even that requires a little bit more explanation. Cold gun doesn't mean no live bullets. There are for sure 100% no live bullets on movie sets. Her injuries, the efforts to revive her, are not in dispute in this case. The evidence will be there. The prosecutor may present some of these emotionally charged images, but we're not going to be asking questions about that, and it's not an issue in dispute in this case.
So you can see right now, he's withdrawing his lips. Now, if he was being asked questions, withdrawing your lips sometimes suggests there's things you don't want to say. Otherwise, it's more likely, at least in this scenario, that he's trying to manage stress and anxiety that the subjects being talked about are causing him a lot of stress. We have lots of nerves in the lips, so when we touch our lips, when we remove our lips, when we rub our lips together, that helps calm us down very dramatically, very quickly.
You jurors are allowed to ask yourselves whether or not that should be the focus or the focus should be the evidence.
Once again, there was him closing his eyes. There's something about this part of the opening statement that really seems to get to him.
You jurors are allowed to ask yourselves whether or not that should be the focus or the focus should be the evidence. So police enter the scene.
And here he is touching his lips right there as you see him doing this. Once again, that's going to help him feel calm. So this part of the trial, this part of these opening statements is causing more anxiety than other parts, apparently.
Not an issue in dispute in this case. You jurors are allowed to ask yourselves whether or not that should be the focus or the focus should be the evidence. So police enter the scene. They have lapel cameras. Thank God they have lapel cameras. You want to see what happens? The evidence will show you can play the videotape. Want to see if they take the right gun? Play the videotape.
So you want to see what happens? You see him nod his head. So I think that for him, he sees that as a point of strength. Oftentimes we have these subtle reactions when we're listening or when we're hearing things. This is, once again, this is not performative. If he was making big, obvious gestures to agree or disagree with what's being said, that's one thing. This is more subtle body language, more automatic. So I think that as the defense is talking about this, he's agreeing that these are strong points for him, and that's probably making him feel more confident. Right now, they're watching body cam footage from one of the officers during the incident. Let's watch for a minute.
where the other person was shot?
Somewhere in the chest
Okay,
or shoulder area.
thank you.
So you can see as he's watching this, he crosses his arms tightly. Now, oftentimes we cross our arms as a way to make ourselves feel comfortable. We do that when we're standing and talking to people. Men do this very frequently. But given the context of this, it's likely that he's crossing his arms because he feels vulnerable. If you think about it from a survival perspective, our face and our chest are very vulnerable. So when we feel danger, we tend to cover ourselves. We cover our face, we cover our chest, because those are our most vulnerable parts. So when we're in a situation where there's something like this that probably makes him feel more vulnerable, you're going to see an automatic reaction to close up a little bit.
Video, sir, can you identify who the set medic is?
It's a little blurry, but I believe it's this lady, right? The one that's bent over with her blondish brown hair.
Is the monitor working now?
Yeah.
So as you can see, he's pursing his lips together again, rubbing his lips together. Once again, we do that to calm ourselves down because there's so many nerves in the mouth. Even before we're born, we tend to touch our mouths. We tend to put our thumbs in our mouths while we're still in utero. So the idea that people use their mouth a lot to calm themselves down, it's very, very common.
Officer LaFleur, who's this gentleman who's speaking now in the blue jean shirt?
There's some issues with the audio. I can hear that as well, but there's nothing I can do about that.
From what I was told, he was on one of the other directors.
So there he is crossing his arms again, leaning back. We tend to lean back when we want to gain distance from something. So going through this, watching this is causing him probably a lot of discomfort, and understandably so, but that's what we're seeing in terms of body language. It's gaining some distance from what he's watching right now.
Officer LaFleur, who's this gentleman who's speaking now in the blue jean shirt?
From what I was told, he was on one of the other directors.
6 or 7, I need an answer. I don't know. Okay.
And you leave out the word accident, that could be an example of taint, couldn't it?
Sure.
And also, non-witnesses can taint people's memories too. You agree with me?
I guess.
So you can see the body position just changed there. Similarly to when I was talking about how leaning back gains distance, gains emotional distance, leaning forward does the opposite. It makes you more engaged. It makes you feel like you're more connected with what's going on. So right now, as his defense is talking about this, he's very connected. He's very much involved in this. And what this says to me is that he doesn't see this trial as a foregone conclusion. He's not going in going, I'm going to get off from this. He's not going in with arrogance. He's going in believing that he has to participate in his own defense and truly sees this as a situation where he's very vulnerable, which that may sound obvious to some folks, but not everybody would approach this situation that way. All right, we'll go ahead and stop here because his body language for the remainder of the first day is basically the same. What we saw was somebody who seems to be engaged in his own defense. He does not seem to be putting on a performance. He's not trying to let the jurors see what he agrees with and what he disagrees with. He's not being obvious with the way he feels about various things. He seems to be stressed, but otherwise seems to be not trying to make himself seem exceptional or to stand out, and that's a good idea. I think that Hannah Gutierrez-Reed struggled with that. I think she made herself stand out too much. Now, people may have come to the same conclusions regardless of how she looked or how she behaved, but you never want to take that chance with a jury because sometimes they are going to have their own feelings about certain things, and that can affect how they see evidence. So at this point, I think that Alec Baldwin is doing a good job of not bringing too much attention to himself. He's paying attention, he seems to be engaged, and there are obviously going to be times where he doesn't like what's being said, but he's not making it super obvious for everybody, and he's not trying to put on a performance based on everything I've seen so far. We'll see if this continues. We'll see if the behavior changes as the trial goes on. If you have any thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comments below. And if there are other aspects of this trial you want me to take a look at, I also want to hear about that. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.